we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting grounds, gathering place, and traveling route to the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Dakota Sioux. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. Hello everyone, my name is Clara. It is my pleasure to be introducing you to this year's 2021 Nellie Talks. So, what is Nellie Talks? Nellie Talks is a virtual video series made to empower young women by having strong, independent, and impactful female speakers from all different kinds of backgrounds speak about their careers and experiences. This event is hosted by the Nellie McClung All-Girls Junior High program at Oliver School. This all-girls program is a junior high that focuses on the empowerment and development of young women and establishing leadership skills in all those attending the school. This marks the 25th anniversary of the Nellie McClung program, and we want to celebrate that milestone with some special alumni speakers. For the past several years, Nellie students have been organizing and facilitating our annual Power of Women event, or POW. At this large in-person event, speakers and students had the opportunity to interact in person. Unfortunately, due to the fact of the COVID-19 virus, we are unable to hold this uplifting and inspiring event in person. However, we believe this event will still be a motivational and an eye-opening experience for those watching. We are honored and thankful to have the opportunity to prepare and host this event, and are proud to say this event has been primarily created by the Nellie L. McClung students. However, this would not be possible without the help from our teachers, staff, and the Nellie L. McClung Educational Society, who helped make this event possible. Without further ado, we'd like to present our first speaker in our very first Nellie Talks event. Thank you.
So first of all, I'd like to say hi. This is not a usual place for me because I'm usually the person on the other side of the camera that isn't recorded. But everyone, hi. My name is Nickola Walker-Kobly. My daughter is Sophie Dufault, and she asked me if I'd prepare a video for her Nellie Talks, and I was very happy to say yes. So let me tell you about me. I'm a mom. Yep, I'm a mom. I'm Sophie's mom. I have another daughter who is also a Nellie. Her name is Tobin Walker. And I'm very proud of both of my girls. I'm also a political strategist, and that's my job. That's been my job for a number of years, and I was asked if I would talk about that, so I said yes. So in 1992, Jean Chrétien was running for Prime Minister of Canada. I'd met him a couple years before that when I was in university. I went to university in Lethbridge and then again in Calgary. He'd come to the university and was touring around the province talking to students. And I was working for the student newspaper at the time. Get involved with your student groups. The newspaper there was called The Meliorist, so I was sent to interview him. It was really exciting. He was incredibly cool to talk to, and really the first, what I would have considered high-power politicians that I had ever spoken to. So in '92, after that, I was working at the law firm Field & Field Perrotton. Jack Perrotton was one of the managing partners of the firm, and he took a special interest in making sure that I became involved in selling tickets to a dinner to raise funds for Mr. Chrétien. So I started making phone calls and chatting with people and selling them tickets to a dinner that were $200 to $500 a seat. I loved it. It was really fun. I got to meet a lot of people. I got to work with a lot of them, getting them to the dinner. At the dinner, both Jack and Mr. Chrétien thanked me, and personally, for the work that I had done, and I was hooked. I moved on after that to a new job at Nortel, which used to be a huge telecom company that existed all around the world. And they were building a plant in the northeast of Calgary. So I worked for Nortel as the communications coordinator, and this meant a lot of political relations with the city and the province and even the federal government. We were building this plant within a very quick timeline, so we needed to make sure that we had a good relationship with them, and we were successful. Part of that was because of the effective connections that we built with the government and all the regulatory bodies. So after that, I took a couple years off to raise Tobin. She was just born. And as I said, Tobin has since she's a graduate of the Nellie system, and hopefully this year Sophie as well. So while I did that, though, while I was raising Tobin when she was 1 and 2 and 3, I continued to help out on various political campaigns all across the country. I was lucky enough to work with a gentleman in Calgary by the name of Dale Hodges, and it was one of his initial campaigns for city councillor in Calgary. I also worked on several liberal campaigns across the country and even some conservative candidates as well. And one of the things I learned was that being a strategist had very little to do with my own political views. I mean, certainly I gravitated towards candidates that I had shared values with, but it was more about me listening. So I also found that I could remember conversations and interesting points easily, and it made it possible to bring these points back up into conversation. And this was really important. Many people think that laws and legislation just kind of happen, and that's completely untrue. I learned that in order to make decisions, you have to understand the history of how you got there. You have to understand what you can change, but you have to also understand what you should change. And these are completely different things. And also how humans are affected by those things. So in 98, we moved to Edmonton so I could open a consulting firm. And I worked with many businesses and politicians through the years. I provided communications and strategic advice for my clients, and I became a political strategist. I hosted many charitable events. I ran campaigns. I won some, I lost some, and I continued to meet more and more new people. A political strategist is a person who the public thinks is responsible for running electoral campaigns, but really it's much, much more than that. We are referred to as consultants or advisors. And at any given time, we can be responsible for many different things. We need to, primarily understand polling, how to conduct a poll, how to interpret them. This is usually a very tricky part. What I see in polling information, I compare to the history of an area or the history of a law. I try to understand what's really going on. And then I decide what should be the plan for the future. We also need to know who to ask in a poll. This is important in order to understand the answers, as well as how to craft the message for a campaign. We need to do a lot of analysis in order to understand the polls, tailor our political strategies, figure out where we should be going next. One of our most fun roles actually is we need to do opposition research. So yes, when we have a candidate, when I have a candidate, I am very thorough in my investigation of that candidate. But I'm also very thorough to find out everything about the competition, because this is one of the most important things in an election, and done correctly can lead to the turn of an election for your candidate, regardless of what their policies are. You have to have amazing communication and networking skills to do this, and this is one of my strongest skills for both strategizing and fundraising. It also led me to work at the legislature, and initially I was the Director of Legislative Affairs, and later I became Chief of Staff for the Independent Caucus. And I worked in this role for a couple years, but it was kind of boring for me. I like the excitement of elections. So I started branching out and working for several political campaigns in other provinces and across all of Canada. I also put together a great team of strategists who were much better at the technological side of campaigns and always let people do what it is that's their strong point. I still work with these people. We help politicians now all over the world. But anyway, in 2015, I left the legislature. During my stay there, I'd worked for many MLAs, worked with a lot of media, helped draft and get legislation and other tools. There's other parts to working that are not just laws. There's motions and other things. But I had those passed in the House. I even led a group of MLAs to split their caucus and oust a premier from her seat. I moved here in Estonia 3 years ago. It's a great country. I love being in Estonia. But I've continued being a strategist, but now I work for people across the world. I have candidates or clients in United Kingdom, in Canada. I do still have many in Alberta. The most important part of my job is maintaining my network, but the second most important is respecting the secrecy of the job. In my opinion, if you know I was involved in a campaign, I've done a bad job. I have great pride in the things I've accomplished, but most people typically don't even know I exist, and I'm good with that. It sort of sets me apart from other strategists. Many people really want to be known. They want to have their name in lights. They want to be in the paper. They want to be on social media. They like to be interviewed. This is not really the way that I work. In short, if you've heard of me, I've done a terrible job. It's also, while some strategists have to continue working hard to get and maintain their reputation, I don't actually have that issue. I get to sit a little bit quietly in the background, helping out people, and I'm still respected for it. And yes, that's bragging. While the roles may seem different, strategists in all fields, even some from opposing political parties, work really closely together to achieve common objectives. So cooperation has always been an important part of my job. And being a woman in the industry has not really made this easy. I think the reason I was able to be successful was because of one important word: yes. I have very often been faced with situations where I had absolutely no idea what to do, what the end result would be, how we were going to get there, but I've always said yes to everything. Frankly, when I first moved into politics, you didn't really see another soul in the ladies' room. There were precious few women involved in politics. There were a handful of elected officials, a lot of assistants. Women were commonly working in the field, smart women, brilliant women, but they were really underutilized. And I refused to let this happen. I worked in the roles of assistant, secretary, researcher, policy writer, but I always knew I wanted to be the chief. And so I made myself the chief. And I did that primarily by saying yes. In politics, men have no problem showing their egos. In fact, if you don't have a healthy ego in politics, you should look for another job. I decided early to vocalize what opportunities and projects I wanted to go for. I had special issues regarding seniors and children and LGBTQ that I really wanted to be in my portfolio of things that I could have influence on. So I placed myself at the front of every parade I could. A lot of the times, politics, the way politics works is that decisions are often made by the people who are immediately in the room. So I went to every event. I sponsored every charity. I donated time and resources to everything I could. I pretended everyone was my friend, and I made them my friends because I needed to be in the room. I'm also helped by the fact that I'm easy to spot in a room because I'm a tall woman. Believe me, I use this to my advantage. I can speak to people directly in their eyes, and it may sound like a really old trope, but women were actually viewed differently because of their height. They were seen as weaker. So I never let that be something that could be thought. I also dressed differently than everyone else. I refused to show off my physical appearance as a woman. Instead, I focused on standing out, but standing up in a room. I was not a person who did their hair, still don't, nails or makeup or flashy clothes. In fact, I rarely even wore a suit. Instead, I like to dress in vintage clothes. Like, I really love Jackie O dresses. And this drew a lot of attention to me. I also know that I'm intelligent, and I make no apology for that. I never played down what I thought. I never played down my opinion, right or wrong. I never made a point, though, without knowing the background on why I had it. And that was really crucial. In my early days, I learned that I really had to avoid being easily offended. Truthfully, in the 90s and the early 2000s, women were still not respected much in politics. That's just a fact. Men and women made offensive comments, sadly, women as well, and you just had to learn to roll with that. In later years, I became a really strong advocate for LGBTQ2 rights, and this was even more important. People don't know how offensive comments they make, even if they've been making them for years, really are. I think it was really helpful to just sort of be cautious about this and conscious of it. I have found that I'm able to guide people occasionally to understand that calling something gay is offensive, even if you meant that it was just stupid. Or saying someone is a cow is not a gentle insult. Equating people to animals is horrible. But thankfully, the vernacular of people in the world is slowly changing. And I think our youth are actually so instrumental in this. One of the other things I like to do is be helpful. I've always subscribed to, as I said, to saying yes. But that doesn't mean I've been someone's servant. I've always respected every person in the room, candidate, consultants, or assistants. They all bring value, and I try to help them all out if possible. Everyone in a campaign or an office is doing hard work, and so you have to be helpful. You have to be a team. One of the biggest stereotypes about women, though, is that you're understanding. And I'm here to tell you that I'm not very understanding. I'm more strategic, I'm more analytical, but I have played the understanding woman role. In fact, this is the reason I was able to create a coup d'etat in Alberta regarding a premier who I simply did not like. Everyone wanted to share how they were angry about this premier and how they felt they were being undermined and treated. So I became everyone's confidant. Eventually, the pattern and number of people and the information I'd gathered during these sessions led me to put together a strategy to oust that premier, and it worked. And maybe one day I'll publish a book about that. I used to say that I was the church lady of the legislature, the woman everybody went to for advice. I was even asked by a couple female MLAs once how and why I was respected and talked to in the legislature, and they were not. And I've also been asked by political aspirants like how they can be more effective. And I told them, and I truly believe the best thing you could do is shut up and listen. It's one thing to have a conversation with a person, but it's another thing entirely to listen to what they are saying, understand their history and what drives them, and then be able to make comments and suggestions that really help them, or at least lead them in my role for me to find out more. The last thing about my role was understanding that you really need to respect other women in the game. You need to recognize their successes. They're struggling in much the same ways you are. This has been really important. I was fortunate to have a great mentor when I was just starting out in my career. This woman was strong and forceful, and I still to this day remember everything I learned from her, despite not really even keeping in contact with her. She demanded, as an example, that people call her Ms. This was totally not a thing in these days. The only people that were addressed as Ms. in the 90s were divorcees, and she had never married. So people couldn't understand that she didn't want to be called Miss. She had to fight this battle over and over, and it was ridiculous how people thought their opinions were more important than her own about how she was going to be named. At any rate, she became an instrumental person in both politics and her career, and I have always admired her. I also have met through the years a number of other women who've also been really important for me to understand how a woman should have a very loud and very clear voice in politics. Often we get called strident, and that's meant to be as an insult, but truth be told, be strident. Like it or not, it can be nearly impossible to advance as a woman if you don't learn from those who came before. You need to pay particular attention to how they have relationships and how those have been cultivated. And you need to take those lessons, believe in your own abilities, and start saying yes. Have a great time succeeding and an even better time failing. Regarding education, there is no one way to become a strategist. Seriously. It's a role that's suited for very few, and they come from all over the spectrum. Some force their way in, as I did. Some come by it through networking. Some because they've been around politics for their entire lives. But a few things are true. One of those is having a degree certainly helps. A major in poli-sci, law, communications, racial policies, gender studies, history, public administration, all these are a really good start. And if you want, it's never bad to continue on for a graduate degree. You can specialize in something like human rights law or municipal law, political and civic organizations, electoral law, decision theory. These are all useful. Really, though, work experience is the most critical thing to have when building a career as a strategist, even if you don't have a degree in a relevant program or you just don't opt for it. But you can really make up for it by volunteering for political campaigns and applying at relevant internships. Apart from gaining experience, you also need to make sure that you develop your skills whenever possible. So talk about your successes with others in the field. Network with people all the time. These include your professors, campaign managers, staffers. Listen to other consultants. Follow them on social media. See what campaigns are doing and ask yourself why, if the public wanted this, did they do that? And was that successful? It's good to watch the strategies of others. You learn so much from them. Every bit of learning will be another reference for you in the future. Remember what you learn. If you can't remember, write it down. The more points you have, the better your chances will be. Understand that there are 20 to 30 more things not being said in a conversation than are being said. And try to figure out what those are. It's not only fun, but it's great brain work. Being a political strategist is quite a rewarding role, I'm going to tell you. It doesn't come easy and it requires a lot of work. There are more and more women joining this field, and I'm proud of the work that I did. Be assertive, be heard, and most important, learn to say yes. Don't worry about fear, you learn from it. Don't worry if you fall on your face. Eventually, you develop so many calluses that it doesn't hurt anymore. Go out there, have fun, because politics is a lot of fun. It really is, and it's so rewarding. I want to thank you guys for inviting me to do a Nellie Talk. Good luck with your futures, ladies. I'm really excited for you. And much love to Sophie Lou. Good luck.